Here we are in Rock Valley, a small rural town of about 3,500 people located in the northwest corner of Iowa. Descendants of Dutch immigrants, the people and culture of the community are largely influenced by Reformed Christianity. The religious atmosphere in the community is evidenced by the 13 different churches in the town. The area is also largely agricultural, consisting of scattered small towns surrounded by fields of corn and soybeans. Agriculture dominates most people's way of life and the economy in Rock Valley.
It's the end of July, typically a very warm month in this part of the country. But it has been especially warm in my hometown this summer. Currently, the Midwest is experiencing a heat wave, a term used to describe periods of sustained above-average temperature. This map, issued by the National Weather Service, is a warning for the massive heat wave spanning the nation this week. Notice that much of the Midwest, including northwest Iowa, has been experiencing sustained heat indices of above 100 degrees Fahrenheit. Today reached 93 degrees Fahrenheit, while the average temperature for today is 86 degrees Fahrenheit. Heat waves like this are becoming more common across the planet, but especially in the Midwestern United States. In fact, according to NASA scientists, the first 6 months in 2016 each set a global record as the hottest month since 1880, when modern temperature readings began. This first 6 months of 2016, from January to June, were also the planet's warmest half year on record, with an average temperature 1.3 degrees Celsius warmer than the end of the 19th century. This graph shows the modern record of average global temperature. It's clear from the graph that global temperatures have been rising since the beginning of the 20th century. However, the spike in 2016 is particularly alarming. What's going on? Is the planet really getting warmer? Could we be experiencing the effects of climate change right now in this very moment in Rock Valley? The truth is we can't really say. Individual weather events, like heat waves, are not direct evidence for climate change. As NASA's Gavin Schmidt says, it's too much weather and not enough climate. However, we do know climate change has shifted the odds of experiencing extreme weather events, like heat waves, across the globe. And even climate change scientists at NASA are alarmed by the data pouring in for 2016. So, this Midwestern heat wave in July of 2016 could very well become a statistic reflecting advanced climate change in the future. While measuring variations in climate is a science, modern climate change is no longer simply a scientific issue. The division between believers of climate change and skeptics has become extremely deep, being fueled chiefly by sociocultural and political factors. In Rock Valley, culture and politics are steeped in religious values, making the town largely conservative. As a result, climate change has become a political issue tied to other deeply held beliefs. In all major elections since 1936, Rock Valley has voted at least 75% Republican, and currently, Republican Steve King represents Northwest Iowa in the U.S. House of Representatives. In 2013, Steve King famously described climate change with the following quote, "It is not proven, it's not science, it's more of a religion than a science." In a deeply conservative part of the country, traditional attempts to convince people of climate science and inspire them to action have failed. In fact, the number of people who are skeptical of climate change is growing. It seems we need a new narrative if we're going to convince people to change their thoughts and their behaviors and become part of the solution to the climate problem. But first, can we, the people living on Earth in 2016, even solve the climate problem? Two scientists at Princeton University think that we can. In 2004, Pacala and Saukalo presented a novel solution to the climate problem, which they call the stabilization solution. The stabilization solution hinges on a timely reduction of global greenhouse gas emissions using technology already available to us. It doesn't depend on new developments or future discoveries. So, solving the climate problem can and must begin today. Over Earth's recent history, the concentration of atmospheric carbon dioxide has remained low. During the Industrial Revolution, carbon dioxide levels in the atmosphere increased rapidly, which brings us to today at about 400 parts per million of atmospheric carbon dioxide. If we continue emitting CO2 at this rate, the concentration will continue growing exponentially. However, if we stabilize concentrations around 550 parts per million, we can avoid catastrophic climate change and keep future warming to 2 degrees Celsius. Stabilizing emissions requires preventing 175
billion tons of carbon dioxide from entering the atmosphere over the next 50 years. Pacala and Sokolow describe these 175 billion tons represented by this triangle as the size of the climate problem. Having quantified the climate problem, Pacala and Sokolow suggest dividing it into wedges. Each wedge represents deploying current technology on a large enough scale to prevent 25 billion tons of carbon from entering the atmosphere. At 25 billion tons each, 7 wedges are necessary to equal 175 billion tons and stabilize carbon dioxide levels. Pacala and Sokolow describe 15 possible solutions that could be scaled up to equal a wedge's worth of emission reductions. In Rock Valley, the most obvious solution involves modifying agricultural practices to reduce carbon emissions. But are such practices realistic for farmers? We're talking with Theo Bartman, a local agronomist and recent graduate of Northwestern College, who also works on his family farm in Rock Valley. Theo, would you tell us a little bit about what you did differently this year when you were planting in the field?
Yeah, so this year we were 100% no-till, which means that we did no disking, and we also did some cover crops and planted right into the cover crops without doing any disking or cultivating of any sort. So.
Interesting. Okay, can you tell us why did you make that decision and why this year and not in the years past?
Well, there's various reasons for that, but I guess the main reason is it's more economical and it's more environmentally friendly, I would say. It's economical because you don't need a tillage tractor, you don't need a tillage tool, you don't need a disc.
Right.
And then it's also environmentally friendly because if you get a big rain right after you hit disc, then you can lose a lot of soil to erosion.
Right.
So we want to prevent the erosion because, I mean, if you lose your dirt or your soil, it costs money that way too. So.
Interesting. Okay, and where did you learn about the benefits of these practices?
I basically kind of taught myself a lot of it. Actually a lot of YouTube videos.
Very nice.
Yeah,
that makes sense this day and age.
Yeah.
Has it affected the family dynamic on the farm?
Well, a little bit. My dad is pretty gun shy of doing no-till. I think mostly because it's kind of traditionally what he always did was till, and
right.
You hear a lot of horror stories about no-till, so
right.
it's
And
kind of, yeah.
How long has he been farming?
My dad's been farming for 35 years, probably.
Wow, so it's a pretty big deal for you to convince him to try this.
Yeah. So this year we were 100% no-till. The year before we did all no-till beans and 1 no-till cornfield. So the no-till cornfield actually did our best last year. So I think that opened his eyes a little bit
Very
too.
cool.
So
Nice.
there was various reasons for that. It wasn't just because it was no-till, but
Right.
you know, it showed him that it can be done. It can be done
Right.
well. So.
Alright. Have any of the decisions that you've made regarding no-till farming or any of the other environmental concerns that you've brought up have anything to do with climate change?
I would say no directly, but I know that it might help with climate change. I have done a little research on how cover crops can take carbon out of the air and put it into the soil. So I'm aware of it, but I wouldn't say that we're doing it to help climate change.
But it's an added benefit.
It is an added benefit, yes.
Alright,
So.
have you and your dad talked about that at all?
I've maybe mentioned it to him, but not really discussed it. So.
Theo was convinced to change his farming practices not because his actions would solve climate change, but because no-till farming is both environmentally friendly and economical.
Involving climate skeptics in the solution will require appealing to people's cultural and political values by communicating the additional benefits of reducing carbon emissions. Obviously, no-till farming in Rock Valley, Iowa will not solve climate change. But if done on a global scale, it is enough to prevent 25 billion tons of carbon from entering the atmosphere, enough to equal one wedge in the stabilization solution. It's true climate change is an enormous problem, but it is not insurmountable.